Good afternoon. I hope everyone can hear me. I'm a senior staff attorney from the Legal Aid Society, and I'm here today with Tanya Love, the program director of the Claimant Advocacy Program, which is a special program that represents unemployed workers. And the project is housed at the Metro Washington Council AFL-CIO. And we're here to spend the next hour to 90 minutes with you to talk about unemployment compensation in DC. So we're specifically talking about district-related law and application of benefits here. And what we've done is we've tried to pad in a lot of time for a question and answer. So hopefully this will give us enough time to respond to all of your questions. Just some administrative issues before we begin, and then I'm going to let Tanya also introduce herself before we start going through our more formal presentation with the slides. I want to let everyone know that we will be making these PowerPoint slides available to all of you. We have all of your email addresses from when you registered, so we'll be following up with PDF slides that include some of the resources we discussed today. Tanya and I are also available to answer questions during the presentation, after the presentation. We've included our phone numbers and email addresses for us. And we've also included in one of the very last slides today information about how to apply for free legal help if you or your colleagues or any of your clients are having difficulty accessing unemployment compensation in DC. So for those of you who are new to the WebEx tool, this is my first time using WebEx as a presenter. I'm usually using Zoom. So I'm also learning new things. So I have our fabulous IT person from Legal Aid, our director of IT, Laura, who's here to help me with any hiccups along the way. If you can try and keep yourself muted, that's helpful. And Laura also will be going in and muting participants if you accidentally become unmuted, just to reduce background noise so we can all hear appropriately. There is a chat box where you can enter questions throughout the presentation. This is because, of course, we're virtual here. I can't see you like I could in a normal presentation. So the chat box is really a wonderful way to give Tanya and I feedback about questions you have, your experiences with these programs, if we're moving too fast, covering some of the material. I'm going to try to answer those questions in real time, but we'll also save time at the end to get to any questions and answers that we didn't get. Okay, so be sure to have that chat feature handy. Tanya, do you want to pop in and say hello and introduce yourself before we get started?
Might as well. My name is Tanya Love. I'm an attorney, as Drake has already stated. I work for the Metro Washington Council, AFL-CIO. We have the Claimant Advocacy Program. We do unemployment cases in the District of Columbia before the Office of Administrative Hearings. I have a wonderful attorney. Her name is Lolita Martin. We work together as a team. And at this moment, and since this pandemic has hit, we have also been working with other great attorneys such as Drake and others that have been instrumental in trying to get people, number one, acclimated to unemployment, because there are a lot of first-time filers. There are quite a few perils involved in getting access to the system, either phone or internet. So we've been doing a lot of work on trying to not only understand it for ourselves, but to be able to explain it to others in terms of both the state requirements, and I'm treating DC as a state, and the federal requirements because of the CARES Act. So that's who I am. So I guess we can get started.
Absolutely. Yeah, let's dive in there. So it looks like we have 90 participants already here. There were about 130 people who registered. So that's probably the majority of people who can come, because I know there's always a little bit of drop off, but it's a wonderful group here today. So thank you all for being with us. So let's go ahead and start our slides. So yes, this is what we're here to discuss today. I just wanted to give you all a quick roadmap of some of our learning objectives. This would be a successful training for me if the majority of our participants come out of this webinar with these understandings. They understand how unemployment compensation can help support workers who are facing COVID-19 related job losses. Two, they understand some of the basic eligibility criteria for unemployment, so the program as a whole. They have information about the nuts and bolts of how to apply, how to appeal, how to choose whether it's DC or another state that's an appropriate place for your claim. And you have the resources that we're going to give you about how to apply for free legal help with our organizations. And there is another organization in town, the Washington Lawyers Committee, which has an employment law project. Some of the lawyers might be here on this call. Hi, Danny. Hi, Dennis. And they do fantastic work with telephone workers' rights clinics twice a week that are still going despite the shutdown. So they are helping a lot of people with unemployment, not only in DC, but also in Maryland and Virginia, and with plenty of other workers' rights issues. This is the quick overview of what we'll cover today. All right, so let's dive right in. How can unemployment compensation help workers? So as you know, I mean, the reason we are all here today is because the COVID-19 public health crisis and the really dramatic steps our governments have had to take to try and reduce death, and serious sickness and the spread of that virus due to COVID-19 has led to catastrophic job losses. So as we've seen in the news, I'm sure some of you have seen these numbers before. I mean, across the country, we are experiencing higher unemployment claims in a shorter period of time than the country has ever seen before. So in March alone, which again, the majority of the country really started experiencing these job losses in about mid-March. DC started experiencing them like March 13th, March 12th or 13th. But nationwide in the month of March, there were more than 6.5 million unemployment claims. And that just has, that has dwarfed any of the numbers, the record numbers that we've had before, even from the Great Depression, great job loss numbers from a 1982 job recession. It has just blown those numbers out of the water. And what we're experiencing in DC, of course, is just a microcosm of this larger problem. DC has already received unemployment claims, so initial applications for benefits from more than 62,000 workers, so almost 63,000 claims. And just to give you some context for just how huge these numbers are, in all of fiscal year 2019, DC received only about 27,000 claims. So just in the last month, DC has gotten more than 2 years worth of unemployment claims in terms of the volume that they're used to processing. So as you can imagine, DC, plenty of other jurisdictions around the country are just completely in crisis mode and trying to be very resourceful and creative, but also having to move very, very quickly and marshal as many resources as they can to be able to help as many people as possible. And one of the very first things that Tanya and I have been talking with each other about and trying to help the community with is people who can't even get in to file initial claims. And we're going to be talking about that a little bit later on, but I just want to flag that right away because some of you in your offices may have seen this already, workers who report that they cannot get through the online claim system, they cannot get through the overloaded phone lines, and Tanya and I are available to help you or to help workers that you're in contact with navigate that process if you need that help. So, the question is, if the problem is catastrophic job loss, then what do we as a country do about that? And the bad news, of course, is the numbers themselves are so extreme. The somewhat good news is we do have a system in place that was designed exactly for a moment like this, where we're experiencing very high job loss and the government decides, or the legislatures decide that they want to use any available tools to get money into the hands of as many workers as possible to prevent our local economies from going into free fall. So every dollar of unemployment benefits that goes out is sent to a worker actually supports the economy, but I think the number is still, it generates $1.6 for every dollar that was sent out in benefits. So a worker who has wage replacements from unemployment compensation, they can pay their rent, they can pay for groceries at the local store, they can pay for a babysitter so they can job hunt. You know, the economic stabilizing effects multiply. So this is what unemployment compensation was designed to do. It was created after the Great Depression. It's a program that is designed to expand and then contract. So the unemployment trust funds get a lot larger in periods of economic well-being, for lack of a better term. So the last 10 years, we've experienced very healthy economic outlooks for many Americans, though of course many people are still excluded from that affluence and have not recovered as quickly, specifically our low-income communities and communities of color. The statistics are very clear on that. But generally, there are more people earning wages. Employers are paying into the unemployment trust fund a small percentage of taxes on the first $9,000 of each of those employees' wages. So the more people who are working, the more unemployment taxes our states are collecting into the trust fund, and the trust fund is growing bigger, and that's what it's supposed to do. The reason it's supposed to get bigger in times when economics are good is because in times of economic downturn, there's going to be a greater strain on our unemployment trust funds than ever before. There'll be fewer tax dollars going in because there's going to be fewer workers who are earning wages for their employers to pay taxes, and more people are going to be drawing from that fund. So this is not something to be alarmed about necessarily. This is how the system was designed, to expand and contract through times of economic recession. And it also was designed to get money quickly into the hands of workers. And quickly, just for context, for DC is about 21 to 28 days. That's actually standard claims processing time for unemployment, even when there isn't a pandemic. So quickly in this context is a month or less of being able to go to a weekly payment from the unemployment system from the date that someone files for benefits. So that's what the system is designed to do. It's exactly to respond here. And what unemployment compensation is this weekly cash payment. The minimum payment in DC is $50. The maximum is $444 per week. And the amount that you get depends on the wages that you've earned in what's called your base period, which is a period of 12 months that occurred about 15 to 18 months ago. So it's not looking at what you earned right in the last month that you were working. It looks at the wages from 15 to 18 months ago over the period of about a year. So anyone who's applying for unemployment compensation in April of 2020, so the month that we're in now, the year that they would be looking at the first analysis would be the wages you earned in calendar year 2019. So from January to December of 2019, just as an example. But unemployment compensation is only available for eligible workers, which is defined by federal and local rules, and we can get into all of that in a minute. So a couple more eligibility rules. So this is just for standard unemployment compensation. How was the system designed? Who is it supposed to help? Bullet point number one, it was explicitly designed to help people who are US citizens or are immigrants with work permits. So unemployment by federal rule is not for people who did not have work authorization during their base year. And remembering again, if you apply this month, your base year would be 2019. So someone who's not a US citizen or would have to prove that they had work authorization for 2019. And that person has to have a work permit for any week in the future in which they're claiming unemployment benefits. So if I'm applying for unemployment benefits in April, I'm going to be filing weekly claims for up to 39 weeks is the current limit. But for all those weeks in which I'm collecting benefits, I also need to have work authorization. The other just really basic eligibility rules for unemployment is that you have to lose a job through no fault of your own. There are going to be people getting fired for what's called misconduct and people who are going to voluntarily quit their jobs for reasons not related to COVID-19. or maybe that are related but aren't considered good cause under the law. There's going to be other kinds of job losses even while COVID-19 is going on, but we're not focusing on all those kinds of job losses today during this training. We're really trying to get everyone up to speed on the COVID-19 related job losses and program rules related to that. But just to know that, there are rules out there that relate to how people lose their jobs. And those rules still exist. We've just layered on new rules with COVID-19 for this particular moment. The third bullet point is, as we've discussed before, you have sufficient wages in your base period. There's a statutory formula that sets out the minimum amount of earnings you need to earn over at least 2 quarters of the 4-quarter, that is the 12-month period of your base period. You have to be physically able and available to work, though there's some exceptions to that. Unemployment compensation is not for people who are permanently disabled or permanently disabled, meaning they're not able to work with accommodations. Plenty of people with disabilities apply for and receive employment because people with disabilities have always been and always are going to be in our workforce. But if someone has impairments or other issues that render them unable to work, even with reasonable accommodations or with part-time hours, then unemployment is not the program for them. People also have to be available to work, meaning if you're on a 1-month international travel or something like that, you're not going to be available to accept a job in the US, and you're not going to be available for unemployment compensation. The standard rule that existed before the public health emergency is also that you're searching for work each week. This rule has been suspended, which we'll get to in just a minute. So again, feel free to use the chat feature if you have questions as we go along. So, in response to this big crisis, catastrophic job losses, Congress made very clear that unemployment is the program that they want to use to funnel billions of dollars into the hands of as many workers as they can. They're also, of course, using the tax system by giving these $1,200 checks to certain individuals and families, which you may have heard about. But the majority of the money that has been set aside in these stimulus bills from our US Congress is funneled through the unemployment system. So Congress acted relatively quickly once the scale of this job loss situation became apparent. They made some big changes to the unemployment system. They added an extra $600 a week for up to 4 months for eligible workers. They added an extra 13 weeks of benefits, again, for eligible workers. So for individuals in DC, they would normally be getting up to 26 weeks of benefits. That's now been expanded to 39 weeks of benefits if people remain eligible for every single week. And the other thing that Congress did was they took a program that already existed. It was called the Disaster Employment Assistance Program, which is meant to kick in. Again, many of these programs were pre-existing. This is how the system is supposed to work. During a period of natural disaster, when there's widespread but temporary unemployment, disaster unemployment assistance kicks in, and Congress is able to funnel money to communities that have experienced loss of income or job loss, but don't qualify for standard unemployment benefits for various reasons. So what they did in this moment was they changed the name of that program. Instead of disaster unemployment assistance, they're calling it the pandemic unemployment assistance. And they've changed some of the rules, but for the most part, it's in line with what Congress has done in the past in natural disasters or other economic crises to funnel money to people who don't normally qualify for unemployment, usually people who are independent contractors or have very low base wages or are unavailable for work because of the pandemic. We're going to get to that in a little bit. Someone is asking me in the comments if we can cover how DC is doing with rolling out the pandemic unemployment assistance program for gig workers. That's a great question. We are going to get to a little bit about what we know about what we call PUA, this program, and what we don't know. right now, DC is not ready to accept these applications on their website. So eventually, we will be funneling independent contractors, people with very low wages who've been denied for unemployment benefits, and large groups of people, for example, parents of school-aged children who are unavailable to work. We're going to be funneling all those individuals to the exact same unemployment claims process as standard unemployment benefits. So there shouldn't be a big difference in the amount of money or even the weeks that people get these benefits if they are eligible for pandemic unemployment assistance. The big difference right now is that DC is still upgrading its computer system and its other training mechanisms for employees to get ready to handle these claims. If you apply right now as a gig worker, an independent contractor, et cetera, you will be denied automatically. And what DC has done is they've created an email address, which I've included later in the slide, so don't feel rushed to write it down. It'll be in the slide that we'll cover later, and then it will also be emailed to you. But they've created an email address that individuals who are interested in PUA benefits can email to get an alert once the system is ready to receive their claims. So someone is asking if a full-time employee can qualify for unemployment if she's already receiving Social Security retirement. There is nothing about getting retirement benefits in and of itself that prevents someone from getting unemployment. So the short answer is yes. You can apply for unemployment if you've lost a job and you meet the other eligibility requirements and you're receiving Social Security retirement. And we see more and more seniors and people of Social Security age who do have to remain in the workforce in order to afford their retirement or for other reasons. You have to know, though, that you do have to meet the other eligibility rules. If someone leaves a job because they're retiring and they're not planning to go back to work at all, they are not going to be eligible for unemployment. Because remember, this is for people who are able and available to work. This is not a supplement to retirement benefits. It's for people who were getting retirement and working, then lost that job and are seeking wage replacements in response to the job they had with their retirement benefits. It's not for people who are permanently retiring. Yes, thank you so much. Tanya's responding to some questions in the chat and sending people that email address that I just mentioned for people who are interested, for gig workers, etc. And that's pua@dc.gov. Okay, so that's what Congress did. We've just reviewed some of the big steps that Congress took in response to COVID-19. These are some really big changes. And DC also made some really big changes. So there's been two different emergency bills that have gone through the DC Council. Both have passed unanimously, and they both have made even more big changes to the unemployment compensation law. So this is an overview of what they put into their emergency bills. And then I've also included a link and the bill numbers themselves so that you can go look for that text yourself if you need it, or you can email me afterwards and I'm happy to talk further. But the first thing is that DC made clear that you are eligible for unemployment benefits, even if you're experiencing a temporary layoff. So for someone who has, maybe they're a restaurant worker, but their restaurant has said, hey, we're not shutting down the restaurant permanently. We're only doing so during the public health emergency. And you don't even need to reapply for your old job. As soon as this public health emergency is over, as soon as the mayor lets our restaurants go back to business, you're going to be back to work. So that person, might not necessarily be considered separated from work if it was a regular unemployment time, but it's not, right? We have these new rules applying. And so just to be clear, that person is eligible for unemployment right now, even temporary layoffs. The DC Council made clear that people who lose income, even if they remain employed part-time, those people are still eligible for unemployment. Now, this was a little confusing to people like me and Tanya, because the truth is that partial unemployment, or going from a higher income to a drop in income, that has always been a situation under DC law that has allowed for partial unemployment benefits. That's not a new program. But perhaps the council was just trying to make that explicitly clear as it relates to COVID-19. So previously excluded workers from the unemployment compensation were also explicitly mentioned in these DC bills, and we've already talked about the pandemic unemployment assistance. So independent contractors, people without sufficient wages who usually were rejected from unemployment, and people who are unavailable to work because of COVID-19. Those people are now eligible for the PUA, the pandemic unemployment assistance, even though standard unemployment compensation won't be the one paying their benefits. Right. So they also got rid of the work search requirements. So during a pandemic, we want workers staying home and self-quarantining or following the mayor's orders. We don't want people out there looking for jobs. And we also know that hiring is basically at a complete freeze right now. So the federal government and then DC followed suit in changing the rules to say you do not need to prove that you're looking for jobs right now. And this was something that DOES did change in their computer system, but both Tanya and I's offices have spoken to dozens of people who initially got denied for this reason. So if you or your clients or other people have been denied for this reason, please contact us because we want to work on those issues and make sure DC is implementing this correctly. And then finally, another important change, which while we're focused on claimants, it's just good to know for the general environment where these law changes are happening. COVID-19 related unemployment claims are not going to be charged to employers' unemployment tax accounts. So again, I mentioned how UI trust funds or unemployment trust funds in each state are funded by employer taxes, and every employer gets a tax rate. And it starts at a low rate, and the more successful unemployment claims that you draw out of the trust fund, your business, meaning you have a lot of layoffs or whatever, your rate starts to go up. They ask the employers whose former employees are drawing more from the fund to kick in a little bit more. So they've changed this for COVID-19 related job losses because it's not the employer's fault that COVID-19 shuts down their business or reduced, their wages dramatically, and it's not the employee's fault. So right now there is basically no harm, no fault at all to the employer in how these are going to be paid. The tax rates are not going to go up if these businesses remain in business and decide to come back. Okay, so what is the result? What is the big picture of all these different law changes? Let's just talk generally about what COVID-19 unemployment benefits now do. There's still a weekly cash benefit, replacing about 50% of past wages. The maximum you can get in DC under standard benefits is still $44 a week, but there's an additional $600 a week payment that's coming from federal dollars that's going to be sent to every eligible unemployment claimant. If you receive even $1 in unemployment benefits, this is the federal rule, then you can get the $600 a week in supplemental payments. And for the majority of our workers, middle class, lower middle class, working class families, and the working poor, this extra $600 a week plus the 50% wage replacement, that will be very close to an 80 to 90% wage replacement for folks. So the unemployment system is basically going from a 50% wage replacement to an 80 to 90% wage replacement for the majority of claimants. So unless your income was very, very high, then this amount won't replace all the wages you've lost from COVID-19, but for the majority of workers, it is. So that's a significant change, and it's a lot more cash in the hands of our workers than ever before, which is why it's so important for everyone who's eligible to be applying for these benefits right now and taking advantage of this kind of cash support. Another change, a big picture, so what does this look like now? We have up to 39 weeks of benefits. Congress could extend this. We could get close to the end of the year 2020. And if the economic position is still not good, Congress could extend this further. They could add on another 13 weeks. But for right now, the total is 39 weeks of benefits, understanding that you have to be eligible for each of those weeks. So if you end up getting a full-time job, then you don't, get to collect the full 39 weeks. It's 39 weeks if you remain unemployed that whole time. Now, employees and independent contractors can claim benefits because, as I mentioned, the wage replacement and the extra $600, that's going to go to former employees and independent contractors who've lost their businesses or had a significant drop in wages. I mean, this money is going to many workers, many more workers than ever before now that it's covering independent contractors through the PUA program. And that's where we really need to get the word out to our client communities. There's going to be a lot of people who don't know that they're eligible as an independent contractor, a gig worker, self-employed, etc. And then for people with very low past wages, people who maybe were only working part-time and then had periods of unemployment during their base period, there is a minimum payment through the PUA program. And for DC, that amount is $180 a week. So the smallest amount of money that someone can get if they're eligible for PUA benefits is $180 a week. Okay, but let's talk about who is still excluded, right? Because this sounds like a big expansion, both in the people included and in the money, and it is, and the length of time. But there are still groups that are not eligible for even these expanded unemployment compensation benefits. And the biggest category by far is immigrants without work authorization. So in terms of the catastrophic job losses that we've seen, none of these numbers include folks who hold, I don't know what the numbers are in DC, but I would guess in the DC metro area, it's at least hundreds of thousands of positions, often cash positions who do not have work authorization, either undocumented immigrants or folks with expired work permits or maybe student or travel visas or other forms of immigration that do not allow for work permits. The majority of these immigrants are paying taxes on these dollars. They are already reporting them. They get an alternative to a social security number, it's called the EITIN, and they are paying taxes. And the reason why is because when immigrants want an adjustment in status, they're trying to apply for a green card. Part of how you build up a case to have a good argument for getting a green card is proving that you've earned money and paid taxes into the system. So these individuals have already been paying taxes into the system, but they continue to be excluded from unemployment compensation from federal rules. And the DC law, the emergency law that was passed, the language is broad enough to allow DC to change any eligibility criteria, except for being physically able and available to work. And what that means is it's theoretically possible that the mayor could expand benefits to include people without work authorization. But I'll let Tanya chime in if she disagrees, but I think it's extremely unlikely given what the mayor has said about providing payments for those folks.
I agree with what you're saying, Dre.
Yeah. So who else is excluded? There's going to be workers who have lost income from COVID-19, but they can't prove that loss of income. So the folks who are getting benefits under the PUA program, we're going to talk about this later, they are going to need to provide DOES some sort of documentation of their wages. This is how my business has suffered. This is how my independent contractor contracts have disappeared. This is a job offer that I had to start in April or May, but it disappeared. They rescinded the job offer, because of COVID-19. There's going to be people who just don't have documentation that DOES is going to accept. We don't know exactly what kind of documentation DOES is asking for. I don't think they've told us exactly, but there are going to be folks, probably people working in cash economies, people who sell food, who do hair, who provide all sorts of maybe unlicensed home businesses or services in their community. There's going to be a lot of people in cash. People working under the table. Maybe they do have lawful work authorization, maybe they're a US citizen, but they're working for cash as a domestic worker, as a restaurant worker. if they can't prove those wages, and especially likely that they weren't paying taxes on them, they're not going to be able to access these benefits. And then finally, people who are not able and available to work for reasons that are not related to COVID-19. So again, people are so disabled they can't work part-time with reasonable accommodations, or are unavailable, meaning maybe they're quarantining in another country or visiting family in another country, or just not in connection with the workforce. Those folks are still not able to collect benefits. All right, I see a really robust chat right now, which is really wonderful. And I see some people chiming in also with answers. DC Jobs with Justice has some fact sheets in English and Spanish, which are great education tools. Does an employee need to show that their job loss was due to COVID-19 in order to receive CARES Act enhancements? The answer is a little bit nuanced. Any claimant who is eligible for even $1 in unemployment benefits for any reason, either under the standard rules or COVID, will get extra 13 weeks and $600 a week payment. So the majority of those folks will be coming into the unemployment system because of COVID-19, but the 13 weeks and $600 payment are not tied to COVID-19 specifically. If you are getting unemployment because you lost your job before this whole thing went down, the public health emergency, you're already just someone in the unemployment claimant system, you're going to get those extra payments, right? Because you're also being impacted. You can't look for work, you can't find a job, you can't get off the unemployment benefits because you can't find full-time work. So that is extended to everyone. For people who normally don't qualify for unemployment compensation, but are trying to get benefits under the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, under PUA, they will have to prove, one, the source of their income if it's not already in the DOES system, and for most people it won't be. They're independent contractors, their wages are not being reported to DOES. And two, they will have to prove that their business income, their loss of income, or their unavailability for work is related to COVID-19. I hope that distinction makes sense, but we're also going to go through some of that proof. Before we move on to the next section, which will probably be a breeze for us, because in covering the first part about COVID-19, we had to cover a lot of basic eligibility issues. But before we go on to that next part, I'm going to pause and let Tanya jump in if I missed anything, or if there's anything else that Tanya would like to share about the COVID-19 related changes.
No, I don't have anything to add. I just know that the common question from everyone that is trying to apply for benefits is the big question: when? When will PUA be up and running? When will the FPUC be up and running? And when, of course, the extended benefits start? We don't have an answer for that. I put that out there on the chat. As soon as we know something, we'll let you know. And of course, keep monitoring the DOES website. And I'm pretty sure every local news station and paper will probably indicate an update as well, because everyone is waiting on the additional money if they're getting unemployment benefits, regular unemployment benefits, the additional $600. And of course, those that don't qualify are definitely anxious and waiting for the additional money that's available, whether it'll be an extended claim or PUA. And of course, the $600, which is the FPUC, I believe is what it's called.
Yeah, that's right. No, the stimulus bills from Congress are really confusing, because they created these 3 new programs and named them all pandemic unemployment something or other. So the acronyms are all very similar. So yeah, it is confusing. So yes, I believe there might be a staff member from Alyssa Silverman's office on the chat. I believe I saw someone chiming in. So she can chime in on the chat if I'm getting this wrong. But I believe our council member who's in charge of the Labor and Workforce Committee that oversees DOES posted on her recent newsletter that some of these changes will be rolled out by the end of April. But I have not heard that personally from DOES. And what I've seen on their fact sheets, which I tried to just review to make sure there weren't any updates since the last time I looked, but DOES has not promised a date, at least to the public. But there seems to be some indication that hopefully that $600 payment might be coming out by the end of April. And yes, Elizabeth Weiss, who's general counsel for the Labor and Workforce Committee at the DC Council, is chiming in. Yes, they have heard that the $600 check should start by April 21st. And the PUA program, which again for independent contractors, those without sufficient wages, those who are unavailable, by April 28th. That's actually pretty fast. I'm on a listserv with all the other states and their unemployment advocates, and they are really fighting to get their states to commit to get these programs up and running. I talk regularly with DOES. I have different concerns about ways that they're implementing some of these programs, and I'm being really vocal and trying to advocate for as many of our vulnerable claimants as possible. But I have to say that if they meet these deadlines, DC is going to be ahead of the pack. There are not many states that are pushing out these law changes this quickly. They're talking about tens of thousands of claims and doing this in a really quick turnaround. So, for all my comments and suggestions to DOES, I think if they really do get this stuff out by the end of April, that would actually be a real success for our communities, though I understand that it never feels that way to the person who has lost income and is desperately waiting for that check. So I'm not trying to make light of anyone's situation, but that is the update that we have now. There's a little bit of question about backdating. I would ask anyone with questions about how far back they can get benefits to contact me at Legal Aid or contact Claimant Advocacy Program about your situation specifically. I've been really wary about giving out legal information about this because the rules are really specific and the guidance from the US Department of Labor is very specific, and I don't want to share any summaries of those rules that might confuse anyone. So let us talk personally, one-on-one, lawyer to client, or just giving technical assistance to your organization if you're speaking on behalf of your members. But contact us so we can talk more about backdating, because that's a little complicated. I saw some questions come through the comment about what happens if you are able to get some sort of work while you're receiving your unemployment compensation. And this is very common. People who apply in DC get approved for benefits, but then they're able to pick up an Instacart position, a Lyft position. There's a lot of delivery, grocery delivery jobs that are available right now, and they may not replace all of your wages. They may be just a fraction of what you earned before, but of course, you're trying to get as much as possible. You need to report your full wages, that's your gross wages, whatever your hourly wage is, multiplied by the full number of hours that you worked that week, plus tips. And you need to report that full amount of gross wages before taxes are withheld. So again, full amount, gross wages, and you need to report that on Sundays when you turn in your weekly claim for that past week. You need to turn that in on your weekly claim card on Sundays, even if you haven't gotten paid that money yet. So I personally get paid on the 15th and the 30th of the month. So I wouldn't have that money in hand if I was reporting my weekly claim for the week that ended in the 7th of the month, but it doesn't matter. I would need to report what I earned that week, what my employer owes me after I've worked that week. Before taxes. And it's really important to do that on your weekly claim cards to prevent any overpayments, you getting too much in benefits. For most people, part-time income like that will reduce your unemployment benefits a little bit. It should not reduce your $600 payment. So that $600 payment is coming to you, even if you just get $1. But it will reduce that standard unemployment payment, which again is between $50 and $444 a week. And there's a statutory formula that I could walk you through, or Tanya could walk you through, about how to do that. And if anyone has questions about how to accurately report on a weekly claim form, we would love to help you with that. We do not want people getting overpaid, because it's a real headache later on when the unemployment office finds out, and then they come after you looking for that money. that can be a real stressor. So we want to help you prevent that. So please contact our offices with those questions. Someone else asked, this extra $600 payment that you're getting per week, so again, that's $2,400 a month, that does not count towards your Medicaid or children's health insurance program, that's a special Medicaid for kids. It does not count towards Medicaid income limits. And that's a federal rule. That's not just DC. That's what Congress said. This $600 payment is not going to kick anyone off Medicaid by itself. Now, it might be, depending on what state you live in, because there's going to be people here who are applying for unemployment in DC because their last workplace was in DC, but you actually live in Maryland or Virginia. I don't know those Medicaid income limits. So it might be that your regular unemployment payment up to $444 a week might kick you off Medicaid, but the $600 payment by itself will not kick you off Medicaid. And if anyone has questions about DC Medicaid eligibility, you can contact my office, the Legal Aid Society of DC, and information is down below. Okay, so I think I'm gonna move on. I do see some extra questions, and Tanya is fielding a lot of those questions, which is awesome. So you can look through the chat for more details on some of this. We'll try and do as much question and answer as we can, but I wanna make sure we keep going on some of our slides. So we've already covered a lot of basic eligibility for unemployment compensation, but there's a couple more details in here that I want to review with you. We've talked about this already, but again, if a worker loses their job because of this public health emergency that Mayor Bowser declared and all the impacts of that, so she ordered restaurants to be shut down, non-essential businesses have to be shut down, etc., those people can apply for unemployment compensation in DC, even if they have a temporary job loss. What are COVID-19 related job losses? There are some examples in the emergency legislation passed by the DC Council, but I want to make really clear, these examples that are included in the law are not the only ways that you can prove that your job loss was COVID-19 related. That's something that Tanya and I, as attorneys who are doing unemployment claims and appeals in DC, we're going to be monitoring this really closely because we want to see how the Department of Employment Services and how the courts that review or the appeals of denials, we want to see how these different parties are interpreting this law. Okay, but here are some examples that are in the law. So these are very, very safe reasons where you can lose your job and it will be considered no fault of your own. It will allow you to get unemployment benefits as long as you're eligible with all the other categories. Okay, so if you are under quarantine or self-quarantine and you can't perform your job, you can't telework, then that is a job loss that's considered COVID-19 related. If your workplace has been shut down as an order of the mayor or because of the public health emergency, that is another reason why you can get benefits. Third, if your workplace was not ordered to be shut down by the mayor, but it's lost so much revenue that it can't operate, and you get laid off for that reason, even if temporarily, or if your wages go from full-time to part-time, you have a dramatic drop in wages, then those are also job losses related to COVID-19. Example number 4 is a really specific example, so I want to caution everyone about this. But the other reason that's mentioned specifically in the emergency rules or the emergency law that allows you to get COVID-related unemployment benefits is a voluntary quit. So the worker themselves initiates quitting the job with the employer, but it's for an employer who's what we call a bad actor. Right. So these are quits where the employer has either ordered the worker to come to work anyways, so physically show up at work, even though the worker is under a quarantine or a self-quarantine order. And the supervisor says something like, you know, I have a business to run, I can't function without you if you don't show up, you know, et cetera, et cetera. Like you basically have to show up anyways. Okay, so a worker can quit for that reason. Another example is if a business refuses to shut down even if ordered to by the mayor. So it's not specific to the worker having to quarantine or self-quarantine, but it's the business as a whole. And the business is requiring its employees to come into work anyways to perform tasks that are not allowed under the mayor's rules right now, then that could be another reason to quit your job, and that will be a COVID-related job loss. Okay, so these are 4 examples in the law. They're not all encompassing. There may be other COVID-19 related job losses. The DOES has published a chart, and they just revised it in the last couple days. It is available on their website. I'm just showing it in my little screen, and I'll include a link to some of these resources in the emails that I send out to everyone. But they have what's called a scenarios and benefits chart. It includes different examples of how you can lose income or lose your job. And it says yes or no, whether you can get unemployment benefits for this reason. This is a helpful chart that you can look at if you find yourself unsure of whether you'll be qualifying for benefits. And of course, you can also call Tanya or I. But one thing I wanted to bring to everyone's attention is they have this specifically as an example of someone who cannot get benefits. If the employee does not have specific related health risks and their employer is complying with guidelines, safety guidelines, but the employee wants to remain home due to fear of exposure, DOES says they will not allow benefits for that reason. They will not allow people to quit their jobs and claim unemployment benefits if they are afraid of COVID-19, unless either they can prove their employer is not taking safety precautions, putting them at greater risk, or the worker itself, him or herself, is at greater risk. And what I advise people who've contacted me about those situations, people who are older, people with hypertension, people with diabetes, people with asthma. I mean, there's lots of, I'm not a doctor, but what I tell these people who are calling me is please, please go to your doctor, call your doctor's office. What you need is you need documentation that explains why this worker should not be working during a COVID-19 public health emergency. That is the best proof that you can get to be able to prove to the unemployment office that you did have to leave work for a health-related reason, even if you're not under quarantine or self-quarantine. Ooh, someone has a really good question about DOES withholding unemployment payments due to past overpayments. The answer is yes. I have already spoken with several people who were approved for unemployment benefits for COVID job losses, and they received a notice saying that their benefits, their current benefits, would be recouped. So they would not receive benefits until the overpayment was paid. There is one of the programs, I think it's PUA, or maybe it's the $600 payment that DC can only withhold half of the benefits. But if someone is in that situation who's watching this video, please call Legal Aid or the Claimant Advocacy Program. We would like to talk with you about your options. When you get that letter saying that the office is going to withhold your benefits, you do have a 15-day right to appeal that to the Office of Administrative Hearings. And you would need to prove that the underlying overpayment is not your fault. You can't afford to go without your current payments. And you can ask an administrative law judge to stop DOES from recouping your benefits. I will also add that there are some states, I think at least 2 right now, who have committed to not collect on overpayments during COVID-19, to not take advantage of the extra money flowing in through the unemployment office to pay themselves back for overpayments. DC has not committed to that at this time, and I don't think it's likely. All right. So when we're talking about the COVID-19 related job losses, what kind of proof do people need to provide? We've already talked about this a little bit. The letter from the public or from the medical professional or local health office that says that, this person needs to be isolating or quarantining, that's going to be really important proof for some individuals that you may need to provide to the unemployment office. You may need to provide proof that the mayor or your local Department of Health ordered you to not work or your business to not work. I am hoping the unemployment office does not make everyone print out all the mayor's orders and turn them in, because the unemployment office, this is publicly available. So for my clients, I'm advocating for DOES to just look at the publicly available information and apply it. But if you want to be really safe, you can find the mayor's orders. These are all at coronavirus.dc.gov, which are helpful. The other kind of proof that might be really common in these cases is if you have a letter or maybe an email, or you could even take a picture of a flyer, if a flyer is posted in your former workplace that says that the employer is laying you off or significantly reducing your hours because of COVID-19. So there's a question here. If a person has their hours reduced due to COVID-19, what happens when the employee can no longer work their reduced hours due to caring for a child who normally would be in school? Okay, so I'm not sure I'll get to the rest of the question. There's several questions in one, which is great. And if you don't get your questions answered, please contact us after. But for the question of a worker who cannot work either their current job or be available for other jobs if they were offered to them because they're caring for a child whose daycare or school is closed. Those people are eligible for the pandemic unemployment assistance. They are eligible for payments under the PUA, which again are the same dollar amount payments. Standard unemployment plus the $600 payment, at least for the next 4 months. That same worker, though this is just now a matter of who is paying the check, whether it's the federal government or the DC Trust Fund, but if you are not available to work because of your kids' school being closed and needing to watch them, DC is taking the position that the Unemployment Trust Fund in DC is not going to be the one paying those benefits. So standard unemployment benefits will not apply to you because you're not available for work. That is a little confusing. If anyone has questions about that, please contact us after, and we can talk about your situation or your client's situation. This is also something that's rapidly changing. DOES has put out some information about it. It was addressed in the recent emergency legislation, so also be on the lookout for updated changes about that. But that's our best answer so far. Okay, so we've gone through COVID-19 related job losses, the proof of COVID-19 related job losses, and we've already talked a little bit about pandemic unemployment assistance, but I just want to make 2 more points about this. There's 2 more kinds of proof that you have to provide if you're applying for pandemic unemployment assistance. And I know this is confusing because you're actually all applying through the same website, right? This is all going to be the same unemployment office. It's the unemployment office's job to figure out which of these programs you're eligible for. But if you know ahead of time that you meet the pandemic unemployment assistance, you can certainly make the claims processing faster by including this information in your initial claim or getting it to the unemployment office as quickly as possible. Because your wages are not going to have been previously reported to the Department of Employment Services, you are going to have to provide proof of past income if you're an independent contractor or otherwise someone who didn't receive W-2s or have an employer who was paying taxes for you, withholding taxes from your paycheck, and also paying taxes to DC for things like unemployment and workers' compensation. So proof of income could be income statements from Uber and Lyft. It could be tax returns. It could be invoices from your clients or proof of contract payments that you receive for your independent contractor services. All of those things would be acceptable proof of wages. And again, the reason you need that is because you want to try and get the highest income replacement benefit possible under PUA. But remember that if you have no proof, but you still meet the rules, so let's say you can prove some wages, but not all of your wages, the lowest amount you'll receive is $180 a week. So that's minimum. But if you can prove that your income was higher during your base period such that it would increase your payment amount, then of course you want to do that. So you will have to provide some proof of past income, not only to qualify to prove that you are working, but also to be able to get the highest benefit amount possible. And the second bullet point sounds really similar, but actually this is different. So someone asked, if I experience a COVID-19 related job loss, do I have to provide proof of that? Well, let's talk about the pandemic unemployment assistance and the special rules related to that. So for independent contractors, people with low wages who don't qualify for unemployment, and people unavailable for work because of COVID. So again, parents of school-aged children is a perfect example. They need to prove separately that the reason that they're not able to work or they've experienced a loss of income is because of COVID-19. So you can look back to that old list we were just talking about for other COVID-19 related separations, and you should be including, that kind of proof as well. But for independent contractors, of course, it's going to look different. Maybe you have a non-essential business, so your business was shut down. Your business meaning either you or, it could just be a business of one if you're an independent contractor, and you were shut down by the mayor. But maybe, this is an issue like the workplaces that their revenue just dried up. Maybe your revenue just dried up because of COVID-19. Maybe your ride sharing app completely shut down, or your freelance gigs disappeared. Like, these are all the examples. You had a job offer, but it disappeared, and you have an email from the HR department saying, we can't hire you right now because of the economic downturn. That's the kind of proof that people are looking for. So someone is asking the highest possible payment for a freelancer who's applying for pandemic unemployment assistance. It's the same maximum payment for other kinds of unemployment. So an independent contractor who can prove sufficient back wages, it's going to be the $444 maximum unemployment payment plus the extra $600. So the benefit will be calculated the same, whether you're getting the payment from PUA program or from the DC Trust Fund under standard unemployment. Hope that answers everybody's question. I know it's a little confusing. Okay, so this is where we share with everyone what we already discussed, which is that DC's computer system is not yet set up to handle these claims. You can email this email address, pua@dc.gov, to get a notification from the unemployment office if you want to be applying for PUA later. You know that you're going to be denied now, or you've already been denied. Okay, so these next sections are really just resources for you. These are just kind of some nuts and bolts, giving you the unemployment office information, the appeal information, some unemployment offices in other nearby states. So we can go through this part pretty quickly, and everyone will just need this information. You'll get it in the slides, and you can just use it for your reference as it applies to you or your clients. Okay, so the first question, where do I file for benefits? I get this question all the time. I last worked in Virginia and Maryland, and then I got transferred to DC. Like, I don't know where to file. The general rule of thumb for DC is that you should apply for DC unemployment benefits if your last workplace was in DC. It doesn't matter if your employer is headquartered in New York City. If your workplace was in DC, you're working for the office in DC or the store in DC, you should be applying in DC. This is true even if you live somewhere else. So DC is one of the states that does not allow you to apply for DC benefits just because you live in DC. If you are a DC resident whose last job was in Maryland, you need to apply in Maryland. You're not going to be eligible for unemployment in DC. Maryland and Virginia have different rules, and that's that's beyond the scope of what we're talking about in this webinar. And I am not licensed in Virginia to be able to give you legal advice there. But some other states do allow you to file in their state if you are just a resident, even if your last job was in DC. So let me give you information if you are someone or know someone who needs to file in Maryland or Virginia. Either they're residents of those states or their last 30-day employer was there. So here's that information for your reference. And then this is how you file in DC. So all the DOES in-person walk-in offices are closed. The American Job Centers are closed. So there are two ways to file. You can apply by phone, but the wait times are extremely long right now. And Tanya and I are helping dozens of people who cannot get through the phone lines after they make their diligent efforts. They just cannot get through after many hours of waiting. people who need language interpretation assistance who can't use the Spanish language website, whether they need other languages as assistance. Amharic is really common in DC, but Vietnamese, French, many other languages, or if they can't read in Spanish, if they're illiterate, they also need to go through the phone line. So that's a real burden right now. DC has, the DOES director has said in press releases and, in press conferences with the mayor that DC is expanding their telephone capacity. They are hiring contracting call services to be able to serve more people on the phone, but this has been a huge problem. People not being able to get through the phone lines, and we want to hear your stories if you are being affected by this, or if you have clients or other workers as members who are affected. So this is the claims website, dcnetworks.org. The website is available in English and Spanish. There's a little gray button that says Spanish. Unfortunately, it is not compatible with mobile phone browsers. So you do have to use a desktop or a laptop. And it is optimized for Internet Explorer, which, as you all may remember, went out of business in 2016. So this is a discontinued browser, and it's frankly very difficult for many of our more vulnerable workers to be able to access this online claim system, just because the website is antiquated, and sometimes the website is even spitting out a message saying that the website is overloaded, it's at capacity, please file again tomorrow. So again, if you have made diligent efforts or know someone who's made diligent efforts to file in DC, you still have not been able to get through, there are no retroactive benefits. You can't get benefits from when you started trying. You need to actually complete an initial claim form to get in the system and in line for a payment to start that week. So please contact Legal Aid or the Claimant Advocacy Program so we can help your members with that, or you. If any of our members receive a denial notice, workers get a denial notice, which could be a monetary determination, which is more about wages that you earned or didn't earn. That can actually be reconsidered directly to the agency. There's other kinds of appeals or denial notices, that are called determinations by claims examiners, or the redetermined monetary eligibility statements. If you have an initial decision by DOES that is denying you unemployment benefits, you have 15 calendar days from the date of that decision. So not the date you received it in the mail, but the date actually printed on the paper that it was certified to be delivered to you, or going out in the mail to you. You have 15 days to file a hearing. And this is the information about how to do that with the DC Administrative Courts, which is called the DC Office of Administrative Hearings. These offices are also closed for walk-in traffic. So again, if you have clients who can't get through on the phone system, don't know how to use email or the online website to file at OAH, send them to Tanya and I. We're happy to help them with that. And after unemployment is approved, what do I need to know? Someone is asking on the phone or on the chat, and I'm sorry, I'm jumping in at about every 10th question. Tanya is fielding questions left and right, but I see just some of them popping up. Ashley asked, what do you recommend to people? Should they file an appeal if they've applied for benefits and been denied, but they're eligible under PUA? Call our offices just to make sure that there really is no argument you should get standard unemployment benefits. But if that's true, there's no argument. You're a bona fide independent contractor. There's no argument you can make that your employer misclassified you and should have been paying taxes for you, or that the unemployment office didn't pull together all the wages they should have, maybe from other states. Then yes, you can just let that denial sit and you can reapply once the PUA gets rolled out. I don't think you need to clog up the appeals court with an appeal. Of course, if you want to, or if you have questions about whether this denial is correct, so you need more time to speak to a lawyer to see if it's correct, or you think it's wrong, then absolutely file an appeal. Legal Aid Claimant Advocacy Program, we're happy to give you advice about whether we think you have an argument. You can always withdraw that hearing request later and tell OAH, the Office of Administrative Hearings, you no longer need to have a hearing. That would be preferable than losing your rights. But if you're sure that you don't meet the standard rules, then yes, you will have a chance to just reapply for PUA. unemployment is approved, as I mentioned, the work search requirements have been lifted. There is no need to search for work during the public health emergency, but it is possible that workers will still be receiving unemployment when the public health emergency lifts. So there might be a point in the future, maybe a couple months from now, we don't know, but checking the news on this, when the public health emergency ends, they might restore work search requirements. So these same individuals may need to start searching for work, even though they've had many weeks of claims getting paid where they haven't needed to search for work. So just be aware. We don't have the details on that yet, exactly when that'll be, but just be aware that that requirement could change in the future when the health situation is less of an emergency. However, all the other eligibility rules apply. And this is just a quick summary of those eligibility rules. We reviewed some of them. You have to file a claim card every week by telephone or online. You have to report severance pay or pension benefits. And the reason why is because those could make you ineligible for your unemployment payments. And if you have questions about that, contact Tanya or I. You must be physically able and available for work unless you're sick or quarantined by COVID-19. Or for PUA, you become unavailable for work because of COVID-19. So again, that's kind of nuanced. So reach out to us if you have questions about your situation or your client's situation. You also must report, if you get a new full-time job, and you have to report any gross earnings from part-time work that you earned during the week when you're filing your weekly claims. That's again, even if you haven't gotten paid for that, but you know that a paycheck is coming. Free legal help and other resources. Here's information about Tanya's organization, which is number 1. Oh, I'm sorry, y'all. Number 2 is the Legal Aid Society. That's me, Drake, and my program. We do unemployment and public benefits. Tanya does DC unemployment. And then the third are wonderful partners at the Washington Lawyers Committee. They have an employment justice clinic, free advice and brief assistance with unemployment and employment law generally. Questions about paid leave, wage theft. And there are other organizations I could have included and probably should have included. I'm thinking of First Shift Justice Project, and there's some other wonderful programs. Arnold and Porter is launching a giant pro bono project for restaurant workers. So if you go to Arnold and Porter's website, they're soon going to have an online application process to get you a free lawyer if you are out of work from the restaurant industry in DC or many other cities around the country. And Legal Aid can also connect you with Arnold and Porter. We're referring folks over there. Someone is asking, what is DC's average weekly benefit amount? That was actually just calculated and published by the US Department of Labor. It's $360 in DC. So Tanya and I might have a disagreement actually about how PUA is calculated, which is, unfortunately, this is so common, guys. These rules are changing so quickly, and I am learning. We are all learning, but I thought that the latest guidance I saw was that PUA benefit will be calculated in the exact same way as standard unemployment. So there is a minimum amount, but the maximum is the same as standard unemployment, $444. But because Tanya and I seem to have read those rules differently, we can, get back to you all about that, or anyone who has questions. We can follow up with you one-on-one. Okay, I just have some other resources. If you haven't yet been going to the DC coronavirus website for the DC government, it publishes unemployment data and claims numbers every day. It has other recovery information and plenty of other resources. The DC Department of Employment Services, their website where they publish their rules and contact information is actually different than the claims website, which is confusing. The claims website there's a link to it, but it's dcnetworks.org, but this is the Unemployment Office website. Then our friends at the National Employment Law Project, which we call NELP, is a national organization. They have fantastic coronavirus-related resources for workers, health and safety information, tons of unemployment information, a great fact sheet about immigration and unemployment. So lots of wonderful resources here. So we've reached the end, and then I have our contact information here. So I've reached the end of our prepared slides. We're getting some really great questions in the chat. We have about 10, 11 more minutes that Tanya and I can stay on the webinar for anyone who wants to stay. We'll try and answer as many questions as we can. And Tanya, please chime in. Tell me what you've been answering on the chat, and of course, chime in with anything I may have missed.
I think you covered everything, Drake. I just want to clarify, and you and I can do it offline. One of the issues with the PUA, as you had stated, was that it's supposed to mirror the DUA, which is normally paid in states that are affected by hurricanes and tornadoes. I mean, significant catastrophic events. So the amounts shouldn't fluctuate. I thought the goal was to have a flat amount given to anyone that's applying. But again, the good thing is you should also qualify for the $600 FPUC. So that's going to give you a nice boost regardless. But we can talk further about it.
Absolutely. And I could be very wrong. So I'm learning a ton. I have been wrong. Tanya and I even talked about doing this webinar once a month or once every 2 weeks because of these really high unemployment numbers we're having, and because of how quickly these changes are rolling out. Every week we have a dozen new legal topics to talk about with each other as we're sharing information about what we're seeing. So if folks would find that helpful, please chime in the chat if you know other people who might attend a training if we did it again in 2 weeks, and it might even have updated information. So absolutely, Tanya, let's I'll promise to review that, and maybe I can include that in my email out to the group.
And then the other thing, I know I missed a few questions. Folks are concerned about how this will be applied retroactively.
Yeah.
No, I really don't. I know the furthest that any of this should go back, and when I say any of this, I'm talking about all of the stuff under the CARES Act, is going to be March the 29th, which was that Sunday, right after the act was signed. I'm a little concerned because everyone who thinks that they should be entitled to PUA are going to be required to try, they probably tried unsuccessfully before, to apply for state unemployment, and then they're going to be kicked into PUA. So we're going to probably see a very large volume of folks, yet again, trying to access the system, and I do mean the web and telephone system, as soon as the PUA portion is open.
That's right.
We have to see how this plays out. And as Drake has already stated, and I definitely agree, a lot of this is going to also play out in appeals. Because some of the language can be interpreted in a different way. And some of the claims examiners and anyone else that plays a role in interpreting how one person can or cannot be granted these benefits, I think it's going to lead to issues, and we'll have to deal with it and deal with it in a way that helps as many people as possible. But in terms of retroactivity, I'm hoping that everyone who's been sitting and waiting for PUA to come online, everyone is allowed to go back to at least March the 29th. I think that would be the only thing that's fair. But I don't have anything else to add.
Yeah. So the list of questions I'm taking with me to report back are clarifying what are the PUA benefit amounts, or at least resources to learn more, as DC announces how it's implementing this new program. So there are things we don't know. And then 2 questions about retroactivity for the $600 payments, and then for the PUA program. These were signed into law, I believe, March 27th, or maybe it was 29th. And so what happens for April if you can't actually get into DOES to apply before the end of April? Or again, I'm hopeful that they meet that deadline to roll this out by April 21st and 28th, but that would be very fast. So what are the states doing? So I think this is, these are some great questions. And Tanya, all of those are good points, and I agree with those. I'm getting some comments that some of them privately to me and some of them to the group, that they would like more webinars about this topic. We do have this webinar recorded, so we can make it available to anyone who missed this training. You're certainly welcome to distribute the PowerPoint. We want it to be helpful. The reason we're talking about future trainings and kind of informally polling our participants who are still here is because this webinar might be out of date in a couple weeks. So I think we probably should commit to do a webinar at least when the PUA program, that brand new program, is rolled out and we have more details. And we can continue to assess, whether either providing a video of this training or whether providing new supplemental materials will be helpful. I'm just really grateful to see so many colleagues and folks in the chat and in the participants list. Thank you for all your really helpful questions. For anyone who is attending this webinar because they themselves have lost income or a job and are trying to understand how these benefit programs apply to you, I really cannot say it enough. Please reach out to Legal Aid or the Claimant Advocacy Program. If you're trying to decide which of us to reach out to, Legal Aid does handle general public benefits. We also serve, we do have some income limits. We do serve lower income workers and prioritize serving lower income workers. The Claimant Advocacy Program, to the best of my knowledge, I don't think has an income limit. So that may be one way to consider your situation and decide who to reach out to. But one of these silver linings through this terrible time of crisis for our city and our country is we are seeing really creative advocacy. We're seeing people coming together to try and share resources. Fellow workers' rights advocates in the labor community and in the legal aid community are doing weekly conference calls. We have never had this level of in-depth coordination. Perhaps we should have before, but I think it's really exciting how we are hopefully providing information that's helpful to the people who need it most, but then also that we can look for reforms for the future. I mean, this is creating such a seismic change in our unemployment compensation system that we should be asking the big questions and getting the community's support on things like, after this pandemic is over, why doesn't unemployment adopt rules to serve independent contractors with unemployment benefits? There's a handful of other states that have already done that. Maybe we should keep that going in DC. There's other kinds of reforms that I think would help long-term as well. So to the extent that we have an opportunity to advocate for those, we're going to continue to do that. I will just give the plug, since we've talked about appeals cases. I'm looking for cases on behalf of limited English proficient individuals. I'm hearing a lot from people in the community, especially Amharic speakers, who are having a really hard time navigating the DOES phone lines and website, trying to interpret some of the English language things on like an app on their phone into Amharic. I mean, it's just a nightmare. So I'm especially looking for people with limited English proficiency to help. And beyond that, I just thank you for being here, and I'll let Tanya have the last word.
I guess my last word is I don't have any additional words, but if anyone wants to reach out to us with questions that you didn't ask and you think of later, but more important that you did ask and I just didn't get to, I'm sorry, but as it's scrolling, I'm still typing. So anyhow, I'll do the best I can to go back. The one thing, Drake, you covered this earlier. I believe I saw some immigration questions.
Yeah.
So again, as long as you are authorized to work, you have a work permit, a social security number, those valid required documents, you should be entitled to unemployment benefits, whether it's the PUA or regular benefits. But I know it was scrolling through, but there were some questions and I missed them. So I hope that is answered, but there was one person that I was in the process of answering or making a reference to NELP. I'm going to drill down even further. I know federal guidelines are going to be a lot more strict than DC when it comes to immigration issues, but they should be parallel. There shouldn't be that much of a distinction. But I'll ask questions. I think it was about temporary protective status. Okay, that's it.
Yeah, definitely reach out to us with those specific immigration benefits related legal questions, because those are often very fact specific. But the general rule of thumb is exactly what Tanya said and what's laid out in some of those NELP fact sheets, which is that you have to have a work permit not only during the base period, so the wages that you earned that are providing the proof that you need wage replacement from the past, and for the current moment moving forward. So any week in which you're claiming unemployment benefits, you also need to have work status for that period. So you need to have work status before and after the job loss. And we could go through those details more individually. Thanks, everyone. You all were fantastic, and I'll look forward to hearing from as many of you as possible.
All right. Take care, guys.